Walk into a supermarket and look at a carton of eggs. Every chicken egg you buy was produced by a female chicken, but behind that simple fact hides a strange question. Where are all the brothers? Commercial egg farms depend on enormous numbers of hens, but chickens produce both females and males. Roughly half of the chicks that hatch are male, and male chickens cannot lay eggs. So what happens to them? Do they grow into roosters? Are they raised for meat? Are they sent somewhere else? Or do they simply disappear from the system? The answer reveals something surprisingly complex about modern agriculture. Male chickens are not biologically useless. Humans have eaten roosters for thousands of years. In many cultures, mature males are still used in soups, stews, broths, and slow-cooked dishes. So the problem isn't that male chickens have no value as food. The real problem is efficiency. Modern poultry production has divided one species into highly specialized lines. Some chickens are bred mainly for eggs, others are bred specifically for meat. They may look similar, but selective breeding has pushed them toward very different biological roles. A laying hen can produce hundreds of eggs in a year. A broiler, meanwhile, is selected to grow rapidly and gain weight efficiently. This specialization makes industrial farming highly productive, but it creates an economic mismatch. When chicks are hatched to produce egg-laying hens, males inevitably appear too. In conventional egg production, many of these males are removed from the production system rather than raised as meat birds. The real surprise isn't that male chicks exist. It's that modern chicken farming is built around producing hens while inevitably producing males the industry has little use for, and the reason lies in how humans reshaped the chicken itself. For much of their history, chickens were raised for several purposes at once. A small flock could provide eggs, meat, feathers, and future breeding stock. Roosters had a role, hens had a role. Farmers didn't need separate production systems. That began to change with industrial agriculture. Instead of relying on one general-purpose bird, breeders started selecting chickens for specific traits. If a hen consistently laid more eggs, breeders were more likely to select her and similar birds for reproduction, increasing those traits in later generations. If another bird grew faster and produced more usable meat, those traits were selected instead. Over many generations, this gradually created highly specialized breeding lines. The result was not two different species. It was two very different types of chicken shaped by human selection. Modern laying hens became exceptionally productive egg producers. Modern broilers became highly efficient at converting feed into body mass. But this specialization created an unavoidable consequence. Every egg-laying flock still begins with newly hatched chicks, and those chicks are not all female. The male offspring come from a breeding line optimized for egg production, not meat production. They do not automatically become efficient broilers simply because they are male. In most cases, they grow more slowly and produce less commercially valuable meat than dedicated broiler strains. And in large-scale farming, that difference matters. Feed costs money, housing costs money, labor costs money. Every additional day an animal remains in the system increases total expense. So if a male bird produces no eggs and doesn't match the efficiency of meat-focused breeds, its economic value becomes extremely limited. This is the difficult reality created by specialization. The system has been optimized so tightly that the male offspring of laying hens no longer fit efficiently into either major category. And that leaves one unavoidable question. What has the industry actually done with them for decades? At a commercial hatchery, the problem begins as soon as the chicks start hatching. A batch of eggs begins to open. Some chicks are female, some are male. The females can eventually become laying hens. The males cannot lay eggs. And if they come from a line bred for egg production, they are usually not efficient enough to compete with specialized meat chickens. For much of the modern egg industry, the solution was brutally simple: male chick culling. The chicks are identified shortly after hatching, separated from the females, and removed from the production system rather than raised. The reason is economic, not biological. A healthy male chick can grow into a normal rooster, but raising that bird requires feed, housing, labor, and time. Those same resources could instead be used to raise chickens specifically bred for meat production. From the industry's perspective, the calculation is difficult. Why invest months of resources into a bird that produces relatively little meat when another breed can reach market weight far more efficiently? This is one unintended consequence of extreme specialization. The system becomes so optimized for efficiency that an otherwise healthy animal can become an unwanted byproduct. And when hatcheries operate at industrial scale, the numbers become enormous. Animal welfare groups? If the issue begins inside the egg, perhaps the solution can begin there too. This is the principle behind in ovo sexing. Instead of waiting for chicks to hatch and then separating males from females, scientists are developing techniques that can determine an embryo's sex while it is still developing inside the shell. The objective is simple in theory: identify the sex of the embryos, Allow female embryos to continue developing, and identify and remove male embryos before they hatch. Researchers are exploring different methods, including techniques that detect biological markers linked to sex during embryonic development. If these systems can operate quickly, accurately, and cheaply enough for industrial hatcheries, they could reduce the number of unwanted male chicks produced. But technology isn't the only possible solution. There is another approach. Use the males for meat. Roosters have been part of human diets for centuries. Males from laying lines may be less suitable for the fast-growing broiler market, but they can still provide meat for soups, broths, and stews, where longer cooking can make the meat more suitable. The problem, again, is economics. These birds aren't optimized for rapid growth or high meat yield. That means more feed, more time, and higher costs compared with specialized broilers. So the industry faces three possible paths: change the breeding system, change the technology, or change the economics. And this reveals something important. The male chick isn't inherently useless. Its practical and economic value depends heavily on the system around it. A backyard flock may value a rooster as a breeder, protector, alarm clock, or source of food. A commercial hatchery sees the same animal through efficiency, cost, and output. Humans created these specialized breeding systems. Now they're trying to manage the consequences. But the rooster wasn't always an economic leftover. In earlier human societies, it held a very different kind of importance entirely. The modern egg industry often makes the male chicken seem like a problem, but humans didn't always see him that way. For much of the history of domesticated chickens, roosters served several practical roles. A small flock required males for reproduction. They could also provide meat when needed. Their feathers had practical uses, and roosters often carried cultural and symbolic meaning. Their crowing became associated with the beginning of the day. Their behavior was linked with courage, aggression, and dominance. In some societies, roosters were valued for symbolic reasons as well as practical ones. Cockfighting also gave them another kind of value where the practice became established. So the modern male chick problem isn't evidence that roosters suddenly became useless. It reflects a dramatic change in how humans organized agriculture. As poultry production expanded, farms began managing enormous numbers of birds. At that scale, every input matters: feed, housing, labor, transport, time. A rooster that isn't needed for breeding and doesn't grow like a broiler becomes an expense rather than useful output. That is the crucial difference. The bird itself hasn't failed. The production model has changed. Humans repeatedly do something similar with domesticated animals. We identify a trait we want, then we breed for it. Then we repeat the process generation after generation. Eventually, an animal that once served many purposes becomes highly specialized. The modern chicken is a clear example. One breeding line became extremely efficient at laying eggs. Another became optimized for rapid meat production, and male offspring from the egg-laying line fit poorly into either system. The rooster still has biological value, but industrial agriculture measures value through output and cost. Under that calculation, a perfectly healthy animal can become economically unnecessary. But this raises a deeper question. If value is defined by the system around an animal, what else in nature have humans quietly redefined in the same way? The story of the missing male chicks sounds like a problem about chickens, but it is really a story about human decision-making. Humans domesticated chickens, descended from wild jungle fowl. Then we began selecting for traits we considered useful. More eggs, faster growth, more meat, better feed efficiency. Over generations, selective breeding amplified those traits until modern chickens became highly specialized. Modern laying hens can produce dramatically more eggs than traditional breeds. Broilers can grow rapidly into birds designed for meat production, but specialization creates trade-offs. That's what happened to male offspring from egg-laying lines. They weren't defective. They simply didn't fit the economic design of the modern egg industry. When we look at animals through production, we see outputs and costs, but biology doesn't work that way. A rooster has no concept of economic usefulness. It simply grows, eats, reproduces, and behaves like a chicken. Usefulness exists in the human system surrounding. Today, researchers are exploring in ovo sex determination and better uses for male birds, but none of these solutions changes the fundamental lesson. Humans don't merely domesticate animals. We redesign them. We decide which traits should become more common. We build industries around those traits, and eventually, animals reflect the priorities we selected. So the next time you see a carton of eggs, remember that the story behind it is stranger than it appears. Modern laying hens exist because humans spent generations selecting for egg production, and every female-focused breeding system also produces males. The male chicken didn't become economically unnecessary because nature gave it no value. It became economically unnecessary because humans built a system with little place for it. Humans can reshape the natural world around the things we decide we need.